I've been in this workshop for about 10 years now, and the last time I did a shop tour video was 8 years ago. So is it too soon to do another? A lot has changed over the past 8 years, of course, but a lot has changed recently also, and you're going to start seeing some of that in upcoming videos. But I wanted to focus on what's changed, why, and most specifically the technology that's in this shop. Because when I did that tour 8 years ago, one of the things I said was,
but in order for things to be handmade, in my opinion, or from the shop, that means I don't use any computer-aided equipment.
and anybody watching my channel right now might even consider me to be a CNC channel because I use that technology so much now. And I wanted to talk about what that has done for me as a person and how much it's changed my workflow and my life, really. Well, let's talk about some of the other stuff first. One thing I want to point out real quick before we go any further is that while you are watching this on YouTube, and I do make YouTube videos, this is not a YouTube woodworking shop by any stretch of the imagination. This is a workshop where I make things for a living. This whole YouTube thing is a small part of my business. It's just something I do for fun and to help build my brand. And the shop does not look like a YouTube shop. It is not clean and pristine. It's not camera ready. There's dirt in the corners. There's stuff laid out. There's projects half completed all over the place. That's the way I operate. That's what you're looking at. There are plenty of immaculate woodworking shops designed for the camera that you can see all over the internet. But no, mine's just like a regular old shop. I don't own this barn. I rent it it's on a private estate in Meriden, Connecticut. When I originally started renting it 10 years ago, I just had those 2 bays there that are open. There's one, the other. Over the years, the other people have moved out and I've sort of taken over the whole barn now. And it's mostly just those 2 bays that I continue to use, although I have the back half of the bay, I have some storage. I let some of the other tenants on the property store some stuff in there. And I keep my old Volvo in that first bay. So when I first rented it, it was just a big open raw space. At the time I just built this giant workbench because I was making a little bit of everything. I wasn't really making guitars yet, except for like some of my silly stuff like the water ski. I was making more furniture. I wanted a big utilitarian bench. I didn't have a lot of tools, but I was making like large tables, a lot of primitive stuff. Having a big table and big space made sense. And then I froze my butt off the first winter because this was wide open, but there was sort of a half wall that went along here that I built up with some just some scrap wood that I collected over the years, and I stuffed it with insulation so I could use my wood burning stove to heat this half. And now that's slowly starting to evolve as I knock these walls out and build these 2 alcoves. So this whole current sort of finished space is about 800 something square feet right now, closer to 900 with this space over there, but we'll talk about that in a minute because I added this 2 100-foot alcoves here. And the reason I did that is I'm bringing the shop closer to the wood burning stove basically, because in the winter it gets really cold in here. By adding this wall here, which I insulated, and then I'm planning on building a sliding door that goes across here, covers the tools I don't use all that often. I can keep some insulation, keep some heat in, and then I can just go onto that side when I need to use those tools, slide the door open, do the work, close the door. I'll be a little cold for a few minutes. This is a Delta jointer that my friend Dave Gagne of Elm City Vintage has given to me basically on permanent loan. Thank you very much, Dave, for that. And then this was my father-in-law's chop saw. This dust collector was actually donated to me by Chris Cute from Make the First Cut, who passed away sadly in 2023. He was a good friend and a really cool dude, and he is missed in our community. This 15-inch planer I actually bought from Tom, the Infinite Craftsman on YouTube. He's the inventor of the Frog Pod you may have seen. He's another local guy and friend of mine we've worked on stuff together in the past. Speaking of personal and sentimental tools, many of you will remember that sitting right here was actually not this brand new SawStop that I just got, but it was Jimmy DeResta's old table saw. It's actually the one that he almost lost his pinky to back in 2010. When he got his first SawStop, he gave me that saw. I went down, picked up, I used it for years and years, and now I have managed to graduate to a SawStop. And so Jimmy's saw is going to get paid forward to someone else. We're in the process of figuring out the best home for that and the logistics of it. But let's talk about the SawStop. My son Vance Maker, you may know him as, used to be very active in my workshop when he was younger. We homeschooled him and he was here at least 1 or 2 days a week working with Dad. And now he's 13 years old. He goes to public school, and so he's not around as much. But I always tried to get him in here using his hands, and he still does sometimes. Of course, this is one of the tools that his hands are never going to go anywhere near until he was 30 years old because they are dangerous. And I've wanted to put a SawStop in here for a while, so if he does express interest and want to start making stuff again, at least I have a little bit of peace of mind as I let him step up to this table. And the way I was able to do it was I got an ARPA grant from my town. It was like a federal grant that was given to small businesses in the area. They were given a big sum of money to sort of dole out in the community, and I applied for a grant where I was able to get this and a couple other tools that we'll talk about. So that was like a huge boon. Of course, I have dust collection hooked up to the bottom of this SawStop, which works so much better than the old Unisaw that I had in here. I invested in this top bar too, which is a little bit annoying because you do end up having to take it off and take it out of the way for a lot of the cuts you do and just put the regular riving knife in. But again, thinking about my son using it, this has these anti-kickback sort of features to it, as well as that top dust collection, help keep things a little cleaner. All sorts of other safety features, because it's not just cutting your finger off you have to worry about table saws, it's all those other things. But the other reason I did it is because I figured this out, is that this is hooked up to my dust collection over there, which is much quieter than a shop vac, and I can take this hose right off and connect it right to my palm sander, and now I have the other big expenditure I was able to make with that government grant was the Shop Max drum sander. Underneath it I have my first lunchbox planer that I often use because I have limited electricity in the shop. I only have one 220 outlet, and that is shared between my table saw, the big planer, and my CNC, which we'll talk about in a minute. And so I can only use one of those tools at a time, and I have to unplug and plug it in. I do use that quite often for the boards that are a little bit smaller. I can run it quickly through. This is a little bit of a Frankensaw that was put together by my wife's uncle Bob, who passed away a few years ago, and one of these like amazing guys that just did all sorts of amazing things throughout his life. He like rode a motorcycle across country in the 50s, and like just one of these like really cool guys. I always love talking to him, and he's deeply missed by my whole family. I'm been in the process of cleaning it up and getting it back into action. It's a little bit underpowered for what I need to do, so I might actually switch the motor out with the 220 for doing resawing, but it's so far working. More than anything, I just love seeing it here, and I love having the connection of this and my wife's family. But the best part is he had painted, for some reason, all his tools in his workshop this shade of green, which is almost exactly the same shade of green that I use for my sway sauce green on everything else. So it was already painted to like match my branding, and it doubles as a green screen. It doubles as a green screen. What he said. I had bought this old Craftsman metal lathe many years ago, and I just never really used it much. But one of my goals for the near future is I want to make more of my hardware in-house here. I'm going to start putting some time into learning how to use this a little better. And I also have a little bit of money left from the ARPA grant that I'm going to invest in a mini mill to put in this corner here on this metal table, so I can start doing some machining and milling in this little area here. Future iterations of this space will be a little bit less chaotic and more functional, usable, and specific, I guess. So this is my old giant scroll saw, very useful tool to have. Again, I love having these old tools mixed in with all this new state-of-the-art stuff. I mean, this is such a great example of this, like 1950s scroll saw next to this state-of-the-art Avid CNC. I wanted to take a quick minute to talk about my channel and ads and sponsorship. Now, I don't have any control over the ads that YouTube just puts up before, during, and after my video. For years, I didn't even have that feature turned on because it aggravated me so much, but then nobody would see my stuff, so I had to turn that on. But when I started doing this stuff, it was all the Wild West. Nowadays, the Wild West has been planted and everybody owns a plantation, right? And I'm still navigating that to what feels good for me. So I have never done, nor do I plan on ever doing, an affiliate link. And let me tell you why. An affiliate link means that I'm going to tell you about a product, and if you buy that product because I told you about it, I'm going to get a percentage of it. So that makes me a commissioned salesman relying on your purchase to make money for me, and I am not a commissioned salesman. So when I talk about brands in these videos, like Avid CNC and Thunder Laser and whatnot, I'm very transparent about the deals I made with them. I made deals with for very expensive machines, and they in turn, I created content for them in exchange for these very expensive machines. Those are deals that are set, and those deals are done and paid for. So now these machines are just in my shop, and they are mine to do what I want with and to speak about how I wish to speak about them. So when I'm here saying these things, I'm not relying on you going to Avid and buying a machine so I can get a percentage. I'm telling you that because this is based on my years of experience with that machine. That's how I still feel about it now after it's all bought and paid for in the way that I bought and paid for it, right? You'll notice I also don't do ad rolls in the middle of my videos. For products that I don't use or believe in. I think I did one last year and I've done none this year. But if I do one on those rare occasions, those are people that I actually believe in and products I actually use in the past my vetting and my sniff test and all of these very strict rules I have about who I will work with or promote, because I don't want to back the wrong horse and end up backpedaling on some product that turned out to be poisonous or some CEO that ended up in prison, right? I want to make sure that these are good people that I know I've looked in the eye in most cases and can talk to, and I'm not relying on selling that product to you. Again, I don't do this for a living. I do this for the passion of sharing and knowledge, and I do need to finance it in some ways, and these are some of the ways I do it is through the products that I sell and some of these tools that I've been able to get in exchange for making this content. I take this stuff very seriously, and man, it's dark out there right now. All the ad peddling that's happening in all this online content. It's really tough to tell what's sincere and what's real. And I just want you to know that here, if I'm saying it, I mean it. I know when you watch these types of videos, you watch anybody on YouTube and you see the tools and you get the envy and you have that attitude of like, well, like that guy's got $8 bazillion in tools. Of course he can make a living and do all that stuff. How do I get started? It takes time. If you see some of these older videos that I'm showing in these little clips in this video of my shop, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 6 years ago, like I didn't have all of this stuff, and it just slowly accumulates over time because I make investments in myself and in my business as I go. And the next thing you get to a point where you have a lot of stuff. So don't feel discouraged by that. Like you need all these things. I was actually started this business like literally, like a lot of guys say, I started it with a skill saw and a drill. So with all that in mind, let's talk about the CNC now, which is one of the most important tools in my shop. I would have said it was the most important tool in my shop, and it was the most important tool in my shop until I got my laser. And now my laser has passed that out for importance, and if I had to choose between one or the other, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but if I had to choose between one or the other, I would probably choose the laser. And we'll talk about why when we get to that. But first, let's talk about why the CNC is so crucial to a guy like me. So what the CNC is it's a second employee that's actually a really good woodworker, unlike me, who's sort of a mediocre at best woodworker. And because of this now, I can have two, or it even feels like three of me working at the same time that I don't have to pay, right? So that's how I can make guitars that are affordable and competitive with other American-made factory guitars and stuff. But more importantly, it's opened up all these possibilities in design for me that were beyond my hand tool comprehension. It made me think in smaller numbers. It made me think in bigger, like, sort of concepts, because I had the ability to take what I knew how to do with my hands and hand tools, and then I learned this whole new language and this whole new skill set of operating a CNC and 3D designing and drafting. And I always say it made me a better woodworker. And a lot of people that don't use CNC have the fear that the exact opposite's going to happen. It's like learning a new word and then you hear it everywhere. This has been the most important part of my journey. Like I said in that video 8 years ago, I thought that this stuff was bad. It wasn't for me, and it was really just fear and ignorance. And I've gotten over that, and here I am today. Like the company that runs makes the software that runs this machine for me, Vectric. Like I went to England with them last year and did a lecture on CNC. Like I've had all these life-changing opportunities because I said yes instead of no to something that was new and hard and scary. And one of the best relationships I forged out of that process was with this company, Avid CNC. I had managed to get my hands on some smaller CNCs, and I reached out to them about doing some video content in exchange for a machine. And it took me a while for them to glom onto that idea, but eventually they did, and I was one of their earlier sort of sponsors. Now they're like this huge company, they're blowing up everywhere, and like everybody's got one of these machines, but I was like part of, they had a different name back then even, and I got a small machine, and then we upgraded to this bigger machine. They're super people, super helpful. The machine is is rock solid, and I'm not going to say it's easy to use and learn this stuff, because it's not easy to use and learn this stuff. It takes time and it takes effort, just like anything else that's worth doing. It takes time and effort, but once you learn it and you figure it out and you can make this thing, you can play it like a violin, which maybe I'm playing it like a like a recorder now. Someday I'll be able to play it like a violin, but it just like literally opened up everything for me. It opened up, woodworking for me. It opened up designing and drafting for me. All these product designs I've had come out of it, that I've been able to sell, and the quality of my guitars, the speed I'm able to make them at faster, higher quality, and for less money. Right there, this CNC. I love this machine to death, and like I said, I would call this the heart and soul of my shop, but it's only one of those. Maybe it's the soul of my shop, but the heart of my shop is my Thunder Laser. Well, I'm certainly one of Avid CNC's earliest YouTube like ambassadors, or whatever you want to call that. I am referred to as Thunder Laser's first ambassador on YouTube. I'm very proud of that fact. When I decided I got so into CNC and I was so fascinated by this, and I was seeing what the laser could do, and I wanted to get into laser cutting as well. I reached out to about 20 or 25 different laser companies to see if anybody would be willing to sponsor my video and put a machine in my shop for me to make some content for them. And nobody even bothered writing back to me except for one, Thunder Laser. I wouldn't have done this if I didn't get into CNC and I started to understand the Lingity and how it worked. And at the time before when I had to get the CNC, and I was like, well, maybe I wanted to get a laser first. The thing about it, the laser didn't make sense because it didn't do 3D. It only did 2D cutting. And so I saw that as being a limit, whereas the CNC seemed more limitless. But the benefits of the laser over the CNC are there's fewer moving parts. There's no moving cutter, right? So it's a laser beam. This particular one is a 100-watt laser beam, and I have about a 23 by 35 inch work area. So I can cut through 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch wood pretty easily, anything thinner very easily. And the accuracy, there's no kerf. Like when you cut something on the CNC, you have to use a cutter, and maybe it's an 1/8 of an inch thick or a 1/4 of an inch thick. And so now you have to plan for that kerf like it would be on a table saw. When with a laser, you don't even have to think about that stuff really until you start getting into real accurate puzzle fitting type stuff. You just cut it. There's like no kerf because the laser is like 0.002 inches wide, maybe less than that, 0.0002. I don't remember what the number is. So it's like basically doesn't exist for most purposes, and you don't have to worry about strapping stuff down. There's no spinning cutters that you have to worry about, like flying off or breaking or destroying something. You can just put flat stuff into this laser and it can cut it, and it cuts it fast, and it cuts it accurate. And so this machine does so much more than I thought it could do. The reason I say if I could only choose between one, I would choose the laser, is because with the laser I could make the templates to then use my woodworking skills to do everything the CNC does, to do that by hand and with handheld tools and routers and stuff, right? As I mentioned before, I want to get into making more of my own hardware and stuff, and I wanted to get into working with metal a little bit more, and so I reached out to Thunder Laser and we worked out a deal for this fiber laser. So now this is a 20-watt fiber laser, and what this does is this basically is designed to etch metal. But as you'll see from some of my prior videos, you can do a little bit more than that with it. You can actually, I've cut some metal very thin, but I can do like 3D etches. Like I made these coins, like by the more you run it, you can actually get some depth and texture to things, which is really interesting and unique. And then you can very quickly mark and etch and label things, put serial numbers on things, stuff like that. So with this, I can now, just in a matter of literal seconds, I can put my logo onto like a neck plate or onto like a bridge part. This machine I'm still learning how to use, is relatively new to me. And for what I'm doing, it's not like this hands down moneymaker like my CNC or my fiber or my CO2 laser. Like this is still a little bit in the toy level for me for value and what it can do. But as I develop my hardware and as I develop my Square Tools line of parts and stuff, what I can do with this, it adds that extra little touch that just goes from, okay, this is handmade to like, this is handmade by like a pro. Now this is another cool thing too. My friend Keith Decent makes these silicone mats, like glue up mats. And if you're working with epoxy and you have a little bit left over, instead of like leaving it in the cup to dry and throw away, you can pour it into these shapes and make little tools like this little spatula. To give you some context of where we are right now, we're backstage. You can see there's the green bandsaw, which is next to my CNC, and then these are those alcoves that I've cut out of the wall that was there. And you can see I just put tarps on them to hold the installation in, because I don't really care what this area looks like. I don't film in here very rarely. So that's the current state of my workshop. Obviously, it's not complete. It's an always ever-changing and evolving thing, as I am an always ever-changing and evolving person, because what's the point if you're not, right? We should always be learning and growing and trying new things. And so I'm excited that, you know, like some of these safety and these new tool upgrades have inspired me to kind of clean things up in here a little bit and reorganize and rethink the way I'm going to do things, and focus in on what I'm happy with and what's working well, and keep that, you know, where it is, but then also add and grow and develop with new possibilities and potential for making new and exciting things. That's my story in a nutshell. Really a lot different than it was 10 years ago when I moved in, for sure. Hey, if you're one of those people that have been around since maybe even before I moved into this shop on YouTube and you're still watching, that's amazing. Thanks, and let me know in the comments. I'm curious. And if you're someone who's a little bit newer to the channel, maybe you came in here after I sort of switched to just guitars, and you're interested or curious about some of these other iterations of my life and work. I have 10 years of it now up on YouTube, and you can go back and see that, what my shop looked like, what my work looked like. I didn't always just make guitars, but I always had this ethos of working sustainably and locally and reclaimed, which has not changed. It's just what I'm doing with it has gotten better and more refined, I guess you could say. All sorts of stuff out there. Go check it out if you dig it, and if not, that's cool too. But I'm excited about all the changes and the growth that's happening here, and I'm looking forward to continuing to share it with you. Not because it's my job, but because I like to. Thanks a lot, and be good.